harebrained utopian scheme. Anyway, he feels that the propelling force is going to be the situation or plight or negative the negative world in which the Jews find themselves. And who would deny that that exists? And he's talking about 1900 or 1896, after the Dreyfus trial, which we discussed to some extent already. I could read you that piece on Dreyfus's sojourn in Devil's Island in the Modern Jewish History Reader, but we've already looked at it, and you can look at it in more detail yourself. Anyway, so we should discuss it fully in the chapter on the causes of anti-Semitism. The current Zionist projects, not the ones he's talking about, the ones he's envisioning, not the ones he's envisioning, but the ones that preceded him. For instance, the Hibat Zion movement is what he's talking about. The current Zionist project and other associations to check anti-Semitism are nothing more than tea kettles in this situation. You know, he says that the situation is so overwhelming, vast, frightening, explosive, immense, that these things are just like Band-Aids, if you want to call it that. And what has propelled him to this insight, where he's a total secular person, never seems to have thought about such things previously? I guess he was so frightened by what he saw in the Dreyfus trial in Paris when he went to cover it as the correspondent for the one of the principal Vienna newspapers, that it just like had a, what is it when you suddenly get struck by, it had a, traumatic effect on it. Traumatic effect.
Epiphany. That would mean epiphany.
Epiphany is too elegant, Joycean, I think, for this. He has an epiphany, okay, but epiphany isn't new. But what is, I think he has undergone a huge trauma, and the epiphany or the insight that he gets here is as a result of that. But okay, epiphany if you prefer, but I think it's a traumatic epiphany. It's like, oh my God, he suddenly sees what is coming. And this is Paris, not Germany. Anyway, he says, he says, look, the situation, the force, you know, is such to propel, no, what is the force that would solve this problem and get away from this, what he considers to be an horrendous situation, regardless of the efforts of Mendelssohn's and Reform Jews and conservative Jews and whatever to conform, assimilate in the previous century. What would propel a large engine to move passengers and goods? I am profoundly convinced that I am right, though I doubt whether I shall live to see myself proved. So, you know, that's all very prescient. You know what the word prescient means? Insightful, foresight, prophetical, if you want. He sees clearly the future. He knows what's coming. That's what's so amazing. The others don't seem to understand what is involved. And I think the reason, as I keep trying to intimate to you guys, is that they're not out in the big world. They don't know the big world. They're still stuck in these communities on the periphery, in ghettos and things. But Herzl is in the middle of the, you know, cultured, civilized world of Europe. Somehow you say, how did that happen? I went to the university and he became totally secularized, and he was propelled forward into this bigger world. And sometimes when you're in this bigger world, you can see things more clearly. But also the insight he has, he doesn't think he'll live to see him proven correct. And that's right too. He doesn't live to see himself proven correct. In fact, he will die about 7 years after what we're reading here at a very young age. Which is, you know, again, he has this sense of doom. He's overwhelmed, I think, with a sense of doom. And that's why the detractors that we'll read presently, you'll see I am prejudiced. I admit it, annoy me so much because they don't understand how they drove this man to some extent to his death, and how they underestimated him, and how they, allowed their petty, even envious situations to not only obscure their view of him, but to bring him down, if you want, which I think is very sad. Not that he could have succeeded perhaps any more than he did, but I think it was a shame that he couldn't have lived out a full life. Those who today inaugurate this movement are unlikely to live to see its glorious culmination. Again, he's so clear-sighted. He sees it so clearly. But the very inauguration is enough to inspire in them a high pride and the joy of inner liberation of their existence. So there he becomes upbeat. It's like he swings back and forth from pessimism to optimism. That's why I'm reading it to you, because you get an idea of his character. Look, I don't want this to be considered utopianism. Utopianism means just, an ideal dream situation. The scoffers will caricature my sketch in this way, and of course that's what they do. So he's very sophisticated, he understands the world he's living in, but the very inauguration is enough to inspire a high pride, and will caricature my sketch and attempt to vitiate the whole idea. And that's what he says is going to happen to him, which is true to some extent. Someone who I explained my plan to said, it's the hallmark of utopia is to present facets of the future as facts in present reality. In other words, giving him a little bit of a jab, if you want. And he replies, no, that's not true. Finance ministers in every country present the facts of the future for their budget as if it's a reality. It isn't just because you're thinking of the future doesn't mean that it's a utopia. Still, I expect more of my readers, middle of the page. I ask the cultivated men whom I address to set aside these preconceptions. I shall even go so far as to ask those Jews who have most earnestly tried to solve the Jewish question to look on their previous attempts as mistaken and impractical. It's quite arrogant, if you want. I don't see why the previous ones aren't as good as the one he's going to suggest, since his doesn't seem to me to be that different, just perhaps a little more practical and sophisticated at the same time. Anyway, I'm not building castles in the air. I state clearly and emphatically that I believe